Hi folks. Today we're going to talk about generating some testable ideas for research. We're going to cover finding some interesting and novel ideas, converting ideas to hypotheses and theories, performing a literature review, and then testing our idea. And we're also going to talk about some ethics. So you want to generate interesting and novel ideas. The object of research is to extend human knowledge beyond what is already known. So we want to do things that are new. Oftentimes we kind of pick up where the person before us left off. When a research study is complete, researchers will try to publish the results in a scientific journal called a peer-reviewed journal. And peer-reviewed journals, these are publications that are specific to science articles. Sometimes they're reviews of a lot of science articles. Sometimes it can be commentaries about other things that are happening in a scientific field. But when an author or a researcher or a scientist turns in something to be published, it goes through a rigorous process of several other scientists critiquing it and reviewing it and making comments, and it goes back and forth a few times. And this is part of the peer review process, and this is what makes it it's not just somebody writing something and putting it out there. It's a lot of people coming together to agree that this is important, that it's done correctly. Most people that are scientists have several, sometimes upwards of 10 to 12 years of higher education. It's something that especially right now in our current times, we hear of people questioning science, and science is actually very, very rigorous. So just keep in mind when you're reading something or listening to something that's maybe a news article versus something that's a scientific peer-reviewed article, that scientific peer-reviewed article is written by somebody who has spent decades working in the field typically, and it has gone through a rigorous review process. So it's typically something you can trust. Not that we don't have changes or people come back later and discover something else, but it is typically something that we should at least give a little credit to. Some of the criteria that we look at for that are important when it comes to publishing is the idea interesting? Can it benefit the society? Can it test a prediction? Does it develop some sort of area in research or some sort of method for research? Journals tend to prefer to publish papers that are going to be widely read and useful to the readers. And then, is the idea new? So we're looking for we want people to add to the already body of science. So I've always explained research as if the ultimate question, if we take something like smoking and whether or not it was unhealthy, does it cause lung cancer? There were hundreds, if not thousands, of different research projects that contributed to a small piece of this overall overarching question. And this is the way science works. So your idea should be one puzzle piece out of the 1,000 puzzle pieces it takes to answer the question. And hopefully it will contribute something new. When we're doing research, our ideas can convert into hypotheses and theories. So a hypothesis is a specific testable claim or prediction about what you expect to observe given the set of circumstances. A theory is a broad statement used to account for an existing body of knowledge and also provide unique predictions to extend that body of knowledge. Let's break this down a little bit more. Hypotheses and theories allow researchers to organize a large body of research in a way that explains an understanding for evidence and provides predictions to organize the expectations for what we should observe. researchers state hypotheses that after being rigorously tested can develop into a theory. So hypotheses can become a theory. Let's go back to the example of smoking and lung cancer. At some point in time, there was a theory that smoking was responsible for lung cancer, or smoking could be causative for lung cancer. There were several hundreds and thousands of research projects that tested different hypotheses, whether or not maybe the type of cigarettes, how often someone smoked, how long someone smoked, whether or not they worked in an environment where they were exposed to other chemicals or toxicants or just different exposures, how someone slept. There were all sorts of other things and all sorts of other hypotheses to test first. Did the type of cigarettes affect whether or not someone got lung cancer? If someone had a lack of sleep, was that something that caused lung cancer? There was all sorts of things that they tested. All of these hypotheses, after a while, started to develop and create and turn into this theory that, yes, smoking does, in fact, increase the likelihood of developing lung cancer. So when we start doing research, the first thing we want to do is come up with a research question. But it's just as important to understand what's already been done, what's in the literature. And when we say what's in the literature, what are in other peer-reviewed journal articles? What's in the scientific literature? In order to do that, we do what's called performing a literature review. So, just to define literature in this context is the general body of published scientific knowledge, and the review is the search that you as a researcher would perform within that body of knowledge. So if you're interested in whether or not childhood trauma can increase the likelihood of participating in illegal activities as an adult, you need to go search childhood trauma, you need to search deviant behaviors, things like that. You want to search all of the literature and come up with a huge body of knowledge that's already been done. The reason why we're doing this is so that we know what has been done, what hasn't been done. It helps lead us into where the gaps are of questions that need to still be answered. Sometimes we even want to ask a question that has been asked before, and we want to try to answer it and see if we come up with the same, maybe try a different method, but come up with the same results. So the previous literature is going to help us define, defend, and disseminate the theories and hypotheses that you have in your research. So you want to get started by choosing a research topic. The first thing you do is develop your research question. And the question's very important. It will help to let the audience or the readers know what it is that you're going to be looking at. It will also help to guide your research. It will determine which variables you're going to be looking at, using, controlling for. So you want to think, what are the questions that haven't been asked yet, or what am I interested in about this topic? And this is going to start with the generation of your research question. Then you want to go into your literature review. And when you're doing a literature review, you need to be organized. You want to choose the right sources. If you're interested in criminal behavior, you don't want to go to a lot of journals about food, health, and things that don't maybe line up. You want to stay in the sources that are the journals that are in the field that you are accustomed to. And any source would be considered published or printed article, a chapter, or a book, anything that you can get information from. So again, scholarly or scientific source is a peer-reviewed article that is published in a scientific journal, and you definitely want to have those. You also want to organize your sources to make it more efficient. You want to begin with a search of review articles, and you want to search from only peer-reviewed or scientific sources. You can start with the highest tier of information you can get, or the most scientific tier of things that you can get. If you're looking at a review article is going to include, it's a review of all the other scientific journal articles that are out there. So if 30 different teams of researchers have written about, again, I can go back to my lung cancer. If 30 different people have written about lung cancer and behaviors, all of that might be captured in one review article. And so that review article can help you determine who else you want to look at and who else you want to find and who else you want to read to learn about this topic. And then you want to understand which sources you have are primary sources and which sources are secondary sources. So a primary source is a publication in which the works, ideas, or observations are those of the author. So the author of the peer-reviewed journal article you're reading went out, did the experiment, collected the data, analyzed the data, and is reporting and recording the data. A secondary source is a publication that refers to the work, ideas, or observations that are not those of the author, that are of something else. Oftentimes when you're reading something maybe from a newspaper article, it's going to talk about scientific journal. You know, a team from Harvard did A, B, and C, or something like that. That would be a secondary source. So review articles, like I had mentioned earlier, a review article, it's going to provide a full summary of research topic by an author who is regarded as an expert on that topic, and it's going to be using a lot of information about secondary sources. It's reviewing what everyone else has done. When you come across a secondary source, when you're reading a paper and they say, when they're talking about the work they've done, you may cite them. When they're talking about the work that someone else has done, the best thing that you can do is to go to that original source, to go to that primary source, find the reference they're citing, and read it for yourself. And then you can then in turn cite it as a primary source instead of a secondary source. It gets very messy, and sometimes it's there's a little bit of respect lost when you cite something that Smith and Jones cited Davis and Green, that blah blah blah. When you start citing people that are citing others, it doesn't always come across as well to the reader, and I think it loses a little bit of strength in the argument. You should not develop your ideas based on a secondary source. The secondary source is someone telling you what someone else said. So think of when you're in a courtroom and they say, well, that's just hearsay. That's kind of like how a secondary source is. So you would want to avoid writing something. There's an example here. Do not write something to the effect of Hibbert as cited by Davies. You know, you don't want to like perpetuate the secondary source. You want to go find the original source, look it up, and then cite it yourself. And that's going to strengthen any literature review or any paper for sure. When it comes to searching for these sources, use your online databases. I've stated in class that when you are a university student, your university pays for a lot of memberships to a lot of journal articles. Always, always, always go to the library, ask the librarians for help. Librarians rock. They are the people that know how to get information on anything from anywhere. They are great gatekeepers to information. You want to know which databases currently have the information in your fields. These databases you can go to. Also, you can set up an account, you can save, you can print, you can find other sources. They allow you to have your own little library of what you have found. You can get full text online. You can get an option of maybe 50 texts that might be interesting for your article. So go through your university library. You can learn how to search by topic. Bunches of articles will come up, and you'll start to understand which databases work with you. You'll start to understand which ones have the types of articles you're looking for your theme or your topic. And you can search for just a specific article, or you can search by themes or topics, or with specific keywords, or by an author. So there's a lot of different ways you can find things. And it can all be done electronically. So even now, right now as I'm filming this or creating this video, we're in COVID. All of this can be done electronically. So that's kind of cool. That's a lot better than it was 30 years ago. Here's some of the different databases I've used the word databases. So PsycInfo. In PsycInfo, there's more than 2.7 million records updated weekly from 49 countries in 29 languages. 99% of the journals covered are peer-reviewed from areas of psychology and related disciplines. So that's a great one for my psych students. We've got PsycArticles, which is a full-text database containing more than 142,000 full-text articles. It's from 66 journals from 1894 to present in the areas of psychology and related disciplines. So instead of just maybe broad searching, you can go to one database and search that database. Versus if you go to Google Scholar, a lot of times it'll pick up on a lot of different ones. So you're also going to get a little bit of noise from maybe some articles that you wouldn't find in your topic as well. PubMed we've got, which is a very well-known database. They have over 19 million records updated weekly, and it's usually biomedical life sciences from 1949 to present. There's the ERIC, there's JSTOR. Again, these are some of the bigger databases and the ones that most commonly people will look at these if you're in behavioral sciences. So this is just an example of how you want to go through trying to perform a literature review. If we were to use, let's say, PsycInfo. So you want to log into the database, and you'll see a lot of different search options. To begin the search, you want to select keywords for the database to search, and you can limit your search to finding keywords like in the article, or you can limit by publication year, you can limit by author, you can limit by a lot of different search options, you can limit by language, that sort of thing. So the best thing to do, because when you search, you might find 250,000 articles. You want to limit that down. So do your first search and just start limiting. Limit by year. Publication year is very important because a lot of times we want the more current articles. Science, as we've said over and over, is an iterative process, right? So we grow off of what's been done before us. So if you're looking at old articles, there may have been some new ones that have some new that have come up and shed light that might shift the way we feel about the older article. So the newer the article is usually a little bit better. There are some classics. There are some definite classics that are older because they were so great and they stuck, and that's where we learned some of our greatest theories. But if you're thinking about things in psychology, public health, epidemiology, the newer articles are dealing with oftentimes a more current globe that we're living in and challenges, and they have taken previous literature and grown from that. And so we typically like to kind of limit our publication year to some of the more recent articles, I should say. And then you want to click search and see what pops up. So a lot of the sources are full text, and they should always have at least an abstract. All sources should have at least an abstract. The abstract is going to be a brief summary of what's happened for the entire paper. It should summarize the entire paper, the purpose, the methods, the results. And it's going to do this for an article or even a chapter or a book. Abstracts are wonderful, but as we move along in our academic careers, that is not always an acceptable way to get all of our information. We need to see if the full-length text is available. And if it is, you want to download it and you want to save it. One great thing that comes from the full-length text is you get all of their references. So you go all the way back to everyone they cited. When you find an article that's great and it's looking at exactly what you're interested in, you want to go to their reference and you want to see all the people that they read about. This is a really good way to build your search for your literature review. If the full article isn't available for you to save, then at least save the abstract and see if maybe someone at the library can help you get the full article. I'm telling you, librarians definitely are a great help and a great resource for you. When you are saving things, though, think ahead as you start to build your library, how you want to save these things. Personally, I use the last name of the author and the year, and then in parentheses, I put a little something. I guess I have certain themes that I've worked on, maybe public health or epidemiology or Philadelphia, or a little thing that will let me know which field this is about. Now, for researchers or scientists, which is ultimately what almost all fields are under, there's two things that we have. We have our integrity and we have our accuracy. So when it comes to integrity, that's the ethics, right? The ethics of how we are doing our work. And one of the things that's most important is to give credit. So in science, we use other people's knowledge to help us formulate where we need to go, where the gaps in science are, what others have done that we've learned from, and determined where we want to then answer the next question. But we definitely, most importantly, want to give them credit because they've already done a lot of work for us. So you always want to give proper credit where credit is due. You want to always double check the sources for accuracy. Especially when you're talking about a secondary source, you go back to that secondary source and you check it and make sure that the first source is actually citing them properly, because otherwise you're perpetuating something that's not accurate. It's best to obtain the primary source for your article you cite. You can, again, always check references in a paper and then go find them. You want to avoid abstracting, which is when you just keep citing references by simply skimming an abstract. It is not always a clear picture, and a lot of times you could be missing something that's very important. You also want to be aware of citation bias. So citation bias occurs when an author or authors cite only evidence that supports their view and fails to cite conflicting evidence. If you're testing something and you want to know if males are different than females when it comes to who communicates more directly or something like that, and you come across 15 people who have looked at communication styles and 10 of them are on the argument that you're favoring and 5 are on the other argument, you want to present both of those because it's important that we go, okay, we're not 100% clear yet. This is what these 10 say. This is what these 5 say. This is what we found in our study. You want to always report both. You want to give the complete picture. There are 3 C's to remember when you're doing a literature review. The first is comprehensive. You want to be comprehensive. You want to search the journal archives, search multiple databases. You want to read select portions of an article to determine whether it's relevant or not. You want to spend time looking at all you can look at. One good thing you can do is to examine each article in the following order, and it will help your search be very efficient. Let me get to the next slide. You want to look at the title, and that's going to be the single sentence that captures the topic to the study. Then you want to glance at the abstract. The abstract is going to give a brief summary of the purpose and the results of the study. You want to look at the introduction, which is an overview of the research topic. It explains how it's interesting and novel. It identifies the hypotheses that are being tested. You want to look at the methods section for sure, And this is going to describe all of the materials, the procedures, the how, where, whens, and whys, the participants, how this study happened and was done and was completed. And of course, the most exciting for me is always the results. And the results are going to give the summary of the analyses, whether it be statistical or observational. It's going to include the figures and the tables, and it's going to include the data about who was in the study, all of that. The discussion is important. This is the conclusion of the study, and it explains how the results then were answered, how the results helped answer the research question and determine whether or not the hypotheses being tested were correct. Sometimes it offers ideas about future research. It talks about what limitations the research came across. And then always go through the references. The references are the listings of all of the sources that they looked at, they studied, they read to get to do what they were doing. And that is a very helpful area of any article that you read. So the second C is that you want to be critical. You want to ask questions. You want to know your sources. You want to remain objective. And that's a difficult one because we definitely come with our own biases. So you want to ask questions. You want to ask yourself questions about the participants, the methods or the procedures, and the conclusions. Is this measuring what I want it to measure? Are there enough participants? Is this capturing, is this eliminating any unplanned variables that we're not thinking of? You need to critically think at every step along the way, has this been designed correctly? Is this research going to answer the question that the research question I'm trying to answer, and is it doing so in an accurate way? You want to know your sources. So those people, the articles, the authors that you found for your literature search, you need to know where the information comes from, what they were saying. You need to understand how legitimate it is. And remain objective. This is key. We come from where we come from. We have walked the walk we walked to get here. We can't remove what we have already learned and don't realize we've learned. So you need to be very keenly aware of that and try to address any potential areas for biases. You also want to be, for our third C, clever. This means that you're creative and calculated in your ideas. So some clever strategies that you can use to get new ideas for your research topic. You want to identify flaws, contradictions, or anomalies. You want to consider subtleties. Think beyond the research. You want to look at previous research and think, yeah, but everyone didn't consider this. Or why do 10 authors feel this way and 5 authors feel this way? So you want to consider previous literature and where these gaps are, where the contradictions are, where the anomalies lie. And again, this will help you formulate your ideas. Another thing we want to think of when we're considering our ethics when we're doing this is publication bias. So publication bias is a tendency for the editors of the journals to only accept articles that show positive results or significant results, and they reject those with negative results. And this is a big one because it's unfortunate when the reality is having a result that says, oh, this doesn't matter, or this isn't a problem, or having these results that aren't really exciting, there's still an answer to the question. So if I'm looking and I'm searching to try to find my keys, and I open a drawer and they're not in there, it's not very exciting, and I still need to find my keys, but I now know it's not in that drawer. So every time we rule something out as not significant, that should also be publishable. And unfortunately, it isn't always publishable. Researchers conduct studies to observe an effect or a significant outcome of a study. And sometimes when this effect or this outcome isn't considered to be beyond chance, it doesn't get published. So you want to keep that in mind. to make sure that some of the journals that you're using are high enough quality that they would publish both results that are significant and results that are not significant. Okay, so here's an example. Suppose you read a few studies showing that a new behavioral therapy for depression significantly reduces symptoms of depression in patients. If a researcher tests the effectiveness of the same behavioral therapy and finds no effect, it is likely that no peer-reviewed journal will accept it. So you will never find it or read about it. It is therefore possible that the effectiveness of this therapy is overstated because studies failing to show an effect are not included in the published peer-reviewed literature. So if we don't say 5 people found it to be effective and 5 people did not find it to be effective, and we only report that 5 people found it to be effective, that is overstating the effectiveness of this therapy. Does that make sense? I sure hope so. So you definitely want to be careful of that. And there are certain journals that as you start to get to know which journals are in your field, you'll start to become aware of who has less publication bias. So this is where we want to start for our literature review, and I have other videos on literature reviews as well, but I think for now we've gone over enough information, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.